Hey guys, welcome back to Kidzone. Kylee Jo here, ready to share another story from God's big story. And as we've talked about before, even though I say these are stories, I mean they're true stories. They're real things that happened. So when we talked about the Easter story, or when we talked about Jesus' temptation, or even last week when we talked about John pointing others to Jesus, these were real things that actually happened. Things we can put in our hearts and bring to mind when we are sad or frustrated and need to be encouraged. So let me tell you what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about Jesus calling the disciples. Now, I'm not talking about calling on a phone, which we've been doing a lot of lately, actually, because we really don't see our friends. We do video chats maybe, or we can talk to them on the phone, or maybe we do Marco Polo. But I'm talking about when Jesus called or asked his disciples to follow him. And the word disciples, we often say they're friends or helpers, or maybe even students. I bet you guys know what students are because most of you are students. So they were a group of people that followed Jesus around, and they learned from him, and they got to watch his life. They got to see the miracles. How exciting would that be? How blessed we are to have the Bible that will show us and tell us those miracles that Jesus' friends got to witness. Well, the disciples, guys, they weren't people that the Pharisees or even maybe us would have thought Jesus would have chosen to be his friends and followers. You know, that is because when God is looking at us, when he's looking at people who want to follow him, he's not looking at the outside. Because guess what? We can all pretend to be pretty good on the outside, at least for a little while. God looks at our heart, guys. And that's what Jesus did. He looked at the heart of these disciples, his friends and followers. Now, thinking about Jesus' friends and followers, it got me thinking about my friends. And you guys, my students. And I miss you guys. And I bet you miss your friends. And you miss talking to your teachers and your students, your friends. And it made me think, you know what? As I hear this story, maybe there's something I can learn about how I can encourage and point people to Jesus like he did with his followers. Maybe I can show some of my friends some of the things I'm learning in Kidzone, or some of the things I've been doing with Awana. There's a lot of things that we can do to help our friends and followers, if it's on Instagram, about Jesus. So let's go ahead and get into our story. Before we do that, we're going to do what we've been doing for the last few weeks, and we are going to do our Bible verse. So let's go ahead and put that slide up there, and we're going to read the Bible verse together. The first time we're going to read it as it says on the screen. The second time, I want you to insert the word Jesus and your name so that we can really remember what this is about. So let's start out reading it together. John 3:30, he must increase, but I must decrease. Again, let's say that inserting those names in there. Jesus must increase, but I, KJ, or Kylee Jo, must decrease. That's right. And that always takes us then to our next section, the big picture question. Guys, we do the big picture question because it sets up why we're learning about this story. So let's put it on the screen and read it together. Why did Jesus become human? Jesus became human to obey his Father's plan and to rescue sinners. Right. So we've talked about this. I think this is about our 5th week, that Jesus came and he was fully human. And why did he do that? Well, we talked about how important it was that he was fully human and lived a sinless life, because the only way that God could defeat death was to have Jesus as his perfect, sinless sacrifice. And he did that very thing. He died on the cross. Did he rise again on the 3rd day? Yes. We learned about that on Easter a couple weeks back. And because he lives, when we believe in him, like we've talked about, we get to spend eternity with him forever. And guys, remember, that's why it's so important that we know the end of the story. We know what happens in the end. So when things aren't so great now, we know the end of the story is we get to spend eternity with Jesus forever. And that is exciting. That's why I stand in front of a camera in an empty room to talk to you guys, because I want you to know and understand how important it is to know and love Jesus in your life. So the next thing is we are going to start this video and we are going to watch about how Jesus calls his disciples and brings them along.
Jesus' ministry had begun. He traveled around preaching about God and telling people to turn away from their sins. People started talking about Jesus and the things he was teaching. They were interested in what Jesus had to say. Large crowds followed Jesus around and listened to him teach. One day, Jesus was walking along the Sea of Galilee. He saw two brothers, Simon, who was called Peter, and Andrew. Peter and Andrew were fishermen. Jesus called out to them, "Follow me, and I will teach you to fish for people." Right away, Peter and Andrew dropped their nets and followed Jesus. Later, he saw two more brothers. Their names were James and John. They were in a boat, fixing nets with their father, Zebedee. Jesus called out to them, and right away they got up, left their father and the boat, and followed Jesus. Jesus went on and saw a man named Matthew, who was also called Levi. Matthew was sitting at the tax office. Matthew was a tax collector. Many people didn't like tax collectors because tax collectors were unfair. Jesus called out to him, "Follow me." So Matthew got up, left everything behind, and followed Jesus. Matthew had a big feast for Jesus at his house. Many tax collectors and sinners came to eat with Jesus and his disciples. The religious leaders saw this, and they didn't think Jesus should be friends with people who did wrong things. They complained to the disciples, "Why does your teacher eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners?" Jesus heard the religious leaders and said, "People who are healthy don't need a doctor, but people who are sick do. I did not come to invite good people. I came to invite sinners to turn back to God." Later, Jesus gathered his followers together and chose 12 of them to be his disciples. Jesus' apostles would work closely with Jesus and would go out to tell others about him. These are the men Jesus chose: Simon, who was called Peter, Simon's brother Andrew, James and John, who were called the sons of thunder, Philip and Bartholomew, Matthew and Thomas, James and the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot. Jesus came to earth to show what God is like and to save people from their sins. This is great news. Jesus told his disciples to tell others about him, and we are Jesus' disciples when we trust in him. Everyone in the world needs to hear the good news about Jesus.
Wow, Jesus called his disciples to follow him. Now, he just came up and said, "Come follow me." And did you hear the disciples didn't be like, "Hey, Jesus, I need 2 weeks to get my stuff in order." Or, "Hey, now's not a really good time, Jesus. Could you try in a week?" No. These disciples, his friends and students and helpers, understood that this was the most important man, that he was God. They didn't understand all of the things he was going to do. Frankly, they didn't even know he was going to have to die on the cross yet. But they knew how important it was to leave their old life behind and to follow him. Guys, in those days, students would wait for a teacher to approach them and ask them to follow him. And just like we talked about earlier, the kind of students that usually were picked were not who the disciples were. What were some of the jobs of the disciples from that video? Do you remember? Yep, some were fishermen, some were tax collectors, and we don't even know some of them as far as what their jobs were, but none of them were the people that lived and worked in the church at the time, in the temple, the Pharisees that we've talked about. So they might not have even been people we picked. I don't know how many of you have gone fishing, but or your moms or dads have gone fishing, but when they come back from fishing, what do they smell like? Fish, right? They might even been a little stinky. Some of them had probably not learned to read or write, gone to school, done those things. But you know what? God looked at their heart, and he can look at our hearts. He loves us so much that he created a way for us to follow him no matter what. So it made me think, can we be followers of Christ as well? Yes, we can be his disciples. And then that means our job is to be like the disciples and show others about him. What is one way we can do that? Well, I can think of a lot of ways we can do that, but one of the ways that I want you to think about this week is encouragement. That's saying a kind word to somebody. Right now, we're all in our own houses and not getting out, but we can still be encouraging to each other. There's a lot of ways we can do that. One way is to send them a message or draw them a picture or even write them a letter. You can ask your mom and dad. They know how letters work probably, and they may even show you what a stamp looks like. You put it in the mail and they get it. So exciting. So I would like for you to think, and this will come up later, I'll remind you during our question of the week, of ways we can encourage each other and be like Jesus' disciples. So let's go ahead and continue with worshiping God.
God of heaven and earth, you are amazing. You hold me up with your hand, you give me faith, and I will put my hope in you alone, in you alone. God of heaven and earth, you are amazing. You hold me up with your hand, you give me faith, and I will put my hope in you alone, in you alone.
I will put my hope in you, Lord. You alone are everything I need. My hope is in you alone, in you alone. I will put my hope in you, Lord. You alone are everything I need. My hope is in you alone, in you alone.
Heaven and earth, you are amazing. You hold me up with your hand, you give me faith, and I will put my hope in you alone, in you alone. Heaven and earth, you are amazing. You hold me up with your hand, you give me faith, and I will put my hope in you alone, in you alone. God of heaven and earth, you are amazing. You hold me up with your hand, you give me faith, and I will put my hope in you alone, in you alone. God of heaven and earth, you are amazing. You hold me up with your hand, you give me faith, and I will put my hope in you alone, in you alone.
If there's one thing we can count on, it's that God will never let us down, and we can trust everything he does. He keeps his promises, we know, because yeah, the word of the Lord holds true. We can trust him, we can trust him. Yeah, the word of the Lord holds true. We can trust him, we can trust him. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow, I am so thankful. We still get to jump around and sing our songs together. VBS is coming up, and I know that if your parents are watching the video or you've heard on live stream, there's been a few changes about VBS, but I'm still excited for you guys to be hearing all of those songs and singing them. I can't wait till we're back together and sing them together as a group. Oh, I'm so excited. But until then, I'm so excited that I get to share this time with you. Let's go ahead and close our time in prayer. Let's fold our hands and close our eyes, not because we have to, but because we choose to show respect to God. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for each and every one of these kids, each and every student of Kidzone and those that are watching online. Lord, I am thankful for them. I am thankful that we are your followers, that we get to be your friends, your followers, your disciples, that you have provided the Bible as a way to see and hear about your life, the true life that you lived for us. I'm thankful for the sacrifice that you've made for each and every one of these students and these kids. Lord, I pray that today it is something that goes deep into our hearts, and you will give us a time to reflect on the ways that you can work in our lives, no matter how big or small we are. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, guys, I told you I would remind you. As always, I would love to hear from you. Your question of the week is this: who can you encourage, and how are you going to encourage them? I'd like to hear your ideas. Maybe you can share an idea with me that I can then do for somebody else. So be proactive. Tell your mom and dad to get their camera out and send me an email with your answer to who you can encourage this week. All right, guys, until next week, I'll see ya.